and connect with like-minded people and explore new opportunities for collaboration. So this is why we are here today. And I wanted to let you know that the event will be recorded. And I would invite each and every one of you to please introduce yourselves in the chat box, indicating your name, your position, and affiliation. If you could proceed to do that, that would be very great. So as we continue with our event today, which is aligned to the UN Women theme for International Day, which is Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. And this theme recognizes women and girls who are leading the charge on climate change adaptation, mitigation, and response to build a more sustainable future for all. To speak to the theme, we have 4 speakers representing different organizations, and this will give us really a holistic perspective, kind of what is really happening out there to help these women play their role as we gear towards climate change mitigation, adaptation for the future. So with us, we have Dr. Musonde, whom I'll introduce more when the time comes for her to speak. We have Major Bean from the UN Women, we have Naomi from Oxfam, we have Dorothy from CARE International. And these speakers have accepted to share with us the issues that they're tackling and their policy relevancy, what they are doing to address these issues, and the changes that they're seeing and how we can better scale these changes. Now, we are privileged to have with us Dr. Catherine Ture, the IDRC Regional Director, who will be giving us the opening remarks, and Dr. Nicoline Dehan, the Director for the CG Gender Platform, who will be giving the closing remarks. But before I hand over the floor to Catherine to give us the opening remarks, let me just mention that it would be good if at all we all remain muted. You can only unmute when it's your time to speak. I'll encourage you to post all your questions in the chat box, and these will be responded to during the Q&A session. We can also use the raise hand function in case you want to speak, make a query, or seek clarification, and we shall get back to these questions when that time comes. Your contribution and active participation will be key to the success of this event. So at this juncture, I would like to take this opportunity to invite Dr. Catherine Ture to give us the opening remarks. And as I've said, she's the Director for the Eastern and Southern African Regional Office at IDRC. You may not know, but she's also a co-author and author of several books and papers, and a member of the editorial board of Langa Research and Publishing Common Initiative Group, which publishes over 50 books about African countries annually. So she's very passionate about writing and Africa. Catherine, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Annette. Good morning, colleagues. Happy International Women's Day. I would like to take a few minutes to just share some findings from the newly released Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC Working Group, to set the stage for our discussion today. So I'll be drawing from chapter 18 and the section, one second, and the section on gender, climate justice, and transformative pathways. Next slide, Janet. So there's 4 findings that I wanted to stress. We know these findings, but it's good to keep them in mind. First, gender and social factors like race, ethnicity, age, income, and geographic location compound vulnerability to climate change impacts. Second, addressing inequities in access to resources, assets, services, and participation in decision-making and leadership is essential to achieving gender and climate justice. Third, intentional long-term policies, programs, and investments are required to shift social norms and behaviors and address structural inequalities if marginalized groups are to effectively adapt to climate change. Fourth, and finally, the authors agree with a very high degree of confidence that, unfortunately, there are still too few examples of the successful integration of concerns for gender and other social inequities in climate policies. So if not now, then when? colleagues, we still have a lot of work to do. And I invite you to make this more interactive, to write in the chat, not even a full sentence, a few words about the one thing that you hope to do this year to make a difference for equality in the context of climate change. And while you're writing and sharing, allow me to share about two upcoming initiatives. Next slide, Janet. On April 12th, as part of the African Studies Association of Africa Conference, IDRC and the Institute of Humanities for Africa are convening panelists from across the continent. They will discuss more about what the IPCC report means for Africa and why we have to act now. We can share the recording of this session with this group later if you would like, but please do let young and mid-career researchers in your networks know that scholarships are being offered to attend the ASAA conference in Cape Town in early April. And finally, next slide, Janet. In closing, I would like to bring to your attention a funding opportunity. Today, Canada's International Development Research Centre is launching Africa Rise, a fund to inform solutions for post-COVID-19 recovery that promotes gender equality and health equity. Up to 20 research teams will be funded for a maximum of 1 million Canadian dollars per team. So please do let research organizations in Eastern and Southern Africa know about this opportunity. A call for concept notes will be launched from the IDRC website this month, and the notes will be due in April. Thank you, Janet, for the slides. And colleagues, I'm honored to be here this morning. And I know we are all anticipating an engaging discussion that informs and inspires our work for gender equality. Let me hand back over to my colleague, Annette Abinakyo Mulema, to get us going.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you very much for sharing those opportunities available. Thanks for sharing the highlights of the IPCC report. I think this encouraging many of us to go back and really take a critical look at the report. And I like it that they actually recognize that we are all not the same. It's important that we get to understand each and everybody in the communities so that we tailor our interventions accordingly. So Catherine had requested us to insert in the chat what we plan to do this year. So you can continue doing that. We shall reflect on those as we go, our commitments for this year. So without consuming more time, our colleagues, we shall have two rounds of flash talks. And at the end of each flash talk, we'll have the Q&A session for the presenters to respond to the questions that have been raised in the chat. And in case you want to speak to or make the question verbally, please raise your hand and you'll be unmuted and make your intervention. So our first speaker is Dr. Musonda, the Director ROM, the Center for Sustainable Development. She's also a co-founder of the Network for African Women Environmentalists. And in 2021, September, she was named as one of the 100 most influential African women. And she'll be speaking to us about supporting and empowering women and girls' engagement within the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. I'm looking forward to learning more about this decade of ecosystem restoration. Musonda, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so very much, Annette, and thank you very much for this invitation from IDRC and partners. Catherine, your statement was absolutely spot on. I mean, all these reports that have been released and really just flagging the importance of science and why science matters. I just want to speak to my history. I was born in the northern part of Zambia near the Congo DRC, former Zaire, and also raised by a South African mother. So this duality of heritage has given me opportunities to really see the strengths of women in these both matriarchal societies and see how they supported us, my twin sister and I, and many of my siblings and cousins and relatives, but more importantly, how they amplified our voices and empowered us without bias, saying you can be anything you want to be. And I want to say that my biggest champion was my dad, because my dad, as his firstborn daughters, my twin sister and I, he was like, you can be anyone you want to be. And I remember being at a reunion, a family reunion, where a family member, when I said I wanted to be a doctor, in the end, I discovered I hate the sight of blood, literally turned to my dad and says, well, I don't think that's what she means. She means she wants to be a nurse. Because for many instances, for all intents and purposes, within a rural setting, we had hardly seen any female doctors, and we've only seen male doctors. Now, speaking to the decade, I want to say 2019 was a special year. In fact, 2018 was a special year because an amazing and special woman called Lina Paul, who was the Minister of Environment of the government of El Salvador, proposed an idea, a seemingly out of the box and unexpected idea that they should present, and together with the African Union and other, the Rio Conventions, et cetera, present an idea for a UN General Assembly resolution on the decade on ecosystem restoration. What was her rationale? Very much in line with your points, Catherine, about the science and the findings of IPCC, to see how many women suffer, girls and children suffer by the plight and impacts of what we've seen as humanity's most challenging threat to this planet, climate change. And we've seen the disasters. We've seen how that has manifested in Madagascar, a drought, and then back to back to back to back to back, 3 cyclones that I cannot remember the names or even how to, is it Bitsarai, Anna, I don't even know the other one. It's daunting and it's shocking and many levels challenging to the very resilience that we're trying to build. So fast forward, when this idea was presented to the General Assembly on the 1st of March 2019, it came through as a General Assembly resolution for the first time ever in the history of the United Nations. A resolution on the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. I will share the link in the chat box there. It is now tagged with a hashtag Generation Restoration. Why does this restoration agenda matter? Because for many instances and many spaces, women have borne the brunt of the impacts of degradation. And in spaces where they have tried to protect these spaces, they have been murdered, tragically and terribly, leaving behind families, children, spouses, communities in a very, very brutal way. On the 8th of March, the same week, right after the launch of the UN Decade, I launched a network that I founded called the Network of African Women Environmentalists, because I was exhausted. I was exhausted by those statistics and numbers. 70% of women in Africa do, 20 do, and then, innovation is championed by da-da-da-da. Who are these women? What do they look like even? What are their names? And how can we amplify their voices and really raise them and share their stories? I was challenged by this. I reached out to several other women and institutions, and I was still at UNEP then, and we did it. And we did it. And it's been incredibly amazing taking this agenda forward. And now going forward, we're also looking to champion some of the topics that have been championed historically by women we know, Professor Wangari Maathai and many others who struggled and fought so much for the very spaces we even take for granted. Living here in Nairobi, and for those of you joining in Nairobi, to even imagine that we are in a city that hosts Africa's largest inner city forest, the Karura Forest. Let's not take that space for granted, because that space was fought for in blood. Wangari Maathai made sure it survived, a space of refuge for a lot of us who were thriving or trying to thrive or even survive, for that matter. During the pandemic, we could only do that in that space of solace and quiet, to be in the outdoors, which was unfortunately many rare in many other places. So in closing, I want to say that as we go forward, as we champion this, breaking the bias, let us remember that you can be what you want to be. But more importantly, what I also want to say is let us stop the business of, yes, we're going to empower women, and then we have them sit on a panel somewhere, toot their name for 2 seconds or 3 seconds, and then forget about them. Let the mentoring begin. Let the hand-holding begin. Because we cannot forget, for me, who is already a woman of a certain age, I'm in the sandwich generation. I'm building on legacies of older women who have come and gone, and really handing over my other hand to the next generation, including my daughter, because I wanted to see that she can be anything she wants to be. She's an avid footballer, loves trucks like hell, has never held a doll, because she cannot stand dolls. And I let her do what she wanted to do. So how do we find a balance in making sure that we teach and really amplify these voices, and we resource them and also support them with tools to be able to thrive, to survive, to champion, and really to conquer the very challenges that many of us have gone through, and make this path easier for those that are coming behind us and those that are with us at this moment. So I'm really, really excited, and I will share some links in the chat function to just really bring on board some of the discussions that are happening in the decade and how you can be a part of it, because this is your decade. And be a part of it, champion it, use the logo for the decade, wherever you may want to use it, because it's yours. You are, after all, the United Nations. So over to you, Annette, and thank you so much for having me at this exciting event, and happy International Women's Day to all. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much, Ms. Sonde, for those highlights. This is your decade. I think we all had that. So nobody should sit back and wait, for the rest to be done for us. We have to move forward, take the lead. I like the breaking the bias that you mentioned. We can all be what we want to do. And the story you've shared about your childhood, I think many of us went through the same. I mean, it resonates to me as well. You want to do this, but then you realize probably it's not my space. So I think we need to be encourage others to take on the challenge and be what they want to be, mentoring the young, hand-holding them. And I like the issue of resourcing the voices and giving them the tools that they need to survive. Thank you very much, Dr. Msonde. Please, I would also encourage you to post your questions in the chat box as we proceed. And as I mentioned to you, we shall be answering these questions after this first round of the flash talks. So next, we'll be hearing from Mojabin Ararakia, the Regional Policy Specialist at the UN Women. Okay, Regional Policy Specialist on Women's Economic Empowerment at the UN Women Regional Office for the Eastern and Southern Africa. I should be speaking about learning from Maputo, including women in climate action leadership. This is also a very exciting topic. Over to you, Mojabin.
Thank you very much, Annette. Thank you also the previous speaker. I think it's a great way to start the conversation, to reflect back on our own journeys of where we have come from. But also the kind of role models we want and the kind of future we want. And that fits very much into the theme of this year's International Women's Day, because we're looking at gender equality now for a sustainable future. And so this is it's a great way to start. And I will go through some of the data. I know some of this may already be, common knowledge for many of you. But at the same time, it's important to sort of set the stage a little bit to understand why we're talking about this and the sort of far-reaching implications of what we're talking about. So in sub-Saharan Africa is the region with the world's the region in the world that is most vulnerable to climate change, with the rising temperatures, rising sea levels, and rainfall anomalies are increasing, and the frequency and intensity of natural disasters are markedly transforming the region's geography, and the previous speaker also mentioned a few of those. So although Africa contributes the least to global warming, it remains the most vulnerable continent suffering the severe consequences of climate change. And climate change has also emerged as a major threat to food security, agriculture, livelihoods of millions of people, including women in sub-Saharan Africa. It is expected to make agricultural development in Africa more challenging due to reasons such as farmers depending on rain-fed agriculture, weather patterns becoming less favorable in many instances, and the heavy dependence of farmers on the rainfall is another aspect of it, increasing the volatility of crop and livestock yields, among other issues. This will in turn have an impact on the economy of the region, as well as agriculture remains a key economic aspect of the region, as well as a key pillar of food security in Africa. The dependence of the African continent on natural resources and rain-fed agriculture has huge implications for climate action and disaster risk reduction. The agriculture sector, which is highly sensitive to climate change and variability, supports the livelihoods of 70% of Africans and contributes to about 30% of the continent's GDP. The high dependence on agriculture also means that women are highly exposed and vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and disasters, as women represent 90% of the employment in the agriculture sector in many African countries. With women and men having differential access to productive resources, other inequalities can follow, including in access to improved seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, tools, equipment, labor, credit, and other factors of production. Women are disproportionately affected by climate change, environmental degradation, and disasters. And in many of the countries, women make up 80% of the people displaced from environmental reasons, and are 14% more likely to die in the event of natural disasters. Similarly, women's disproportionate burden of unpaid care and domestic work implies that they are commonly responsible for fetching water or collecting cooking fuel. With the increased climate incidences, women need to invest more time to meet their family's needs. For example, because of droughts, women may need to walk further to fetch water, exposing them to increased time poverty, but also to further risks of gender-based violence. Now, we do have opportunities in policy as well as to make change. Women and girls in Africa already play a critical role in climate change adaptation and mitigation through their role in agriculture or through sustainable management of resources and conservation of ecosystems, including those with important carbon sequestration functions such as forests, mangroves, etc. Women in rural indigenous contexts play a central role in biodiversity conservation and sustainable food and agriculture systems as farmers, producers, and more importantly, as knowledge holders. In light of this, policies that assess gender gaps, identify actions to close them, and promote women's engagement in climate action, including decision-making processes, are crucial. In a study done by UN Women based on the Maputo Protocol, entitled Benefits Derived by Women in the 10% Agriculture Budget, which is the target set in the Maputo Protocol, in countries where the 10% budget allocation for agriculture was reached, women were less likely to benefit from the increased budget allocation if women were not included in decision-making or a gender-responsive budgeting approach was not utilized. Similarly, in some countries we studied, even where the 10% budget allocation was not reached, but women were included in decision-making, women were more likely to benefit. Therefore, policies should consider the following aspects. Integrating gender perspectives into climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction is important in both policies and programs. Promoting women and girls' full participation and leadership in climate change adaptation or disaster risk reduction action and governance at all levels is also important. Strengthening the capacities of women and girls to be resilient in the face of climate adaptation and disaster reduction. Increasing gender-responsive climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction financing, including innovative financing approaches. And here we're not just looking at, providing funding to women entrepreneurs who might be working on a climate smart technology or in a green business, which is also very important, but we're looking at how governments and large-scale actors can really invest in financing for climate change and gender equality. And here we're looking towards central banks, international finance corporations, and other large-scale sectors that can make a structural change rather than the micro grants that we tend to used to seeing in the green economy space and to support women entrepreneurs. And finally, we want to put women at the center of a just transition to the green economy. In a study done by UN Women, we estimated that 24 million jobs will be created in the next decade in the green economy. How are we ensuring that women are able to access those jobs and be able to capitalize from this growth? Leveraging the green economy policy instruments for women's employment is another key aspect, and improving gender statistics and sex disaggregated data in the gender environment nexus. One of the challenges that has come through very clearly in preparation for this International Women's Day is that sex disaggregated data in environment is not really easily available. So what are we going to do about this? As UN Women, we have been working for several years to address the impacts of climate change on women, mainly through our Climate Smart Agriculture Flagship Program. Currently, the programs are running in 9 countries in East and Southern Africa, with a focus on supporting women across various value chains, working with women and youth and their communities to support women's agency, influencing and holistic contributions to the sustainable farming methods that are cognizant of the environment, climate change, and disaster risk reduction. This includes contributions to securing local food supply, nutrition, incomes, and livelihoods across different value chains and sectors. Going forward, we will have more of a focus on the green and blue economies and really bringing this forward and really modeling ways on how women and people in rural areas, including young people, are able to capitalize from the green economy. We say young people as well with the increased focus on this because 65% of the population in Africa is under the age of 25. And the future really does belong to them. However, the other part of it is that the highest number of the unemployed population, if you disaggregate the unemployed population into the different demographic groups, young women are among the highest unemployed population. This means not that young women don't have jobs. This means that young women are actively seeking jobs at a higher rate than men and are unable to find those jobs, which means that there is the structural and cultural norms that we used to know, the barriers that we used to see, the biases that women don't go to work are already being broken by these girls. What we are not able to do and what the economies are not able to respond to right now is to provide those girls jobs. And that's one of the reasons why we will be looking at this. There are many results that I can talk about in terms of UN Women's work, and I won't go into the details of this, but I would like to say that our climate smart agriculture programs have reached thousands, I think almost 50,000 women in the last 3 years in sub-Saharan Africa to equip them with skills and knowledge on how to mitigate climate change while ensuring and securing their agriculture livelihoods. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Benjamin. Very exciting. Thank you very much for sharing the work at the UN. As we've all heard, Benjamin has placed a lot of emphasis on the need for policies that really engage women in decision-making. Similar to Musonde, she has also highlighted the need to invest in women, the young women that are looking for these jobs. There are so many opportunities that emerging in the green economy, and how can we ensure that young girls or young women really, sorry, this is my timing, benefit from these opportunities that are presented by the green economy. So thank you very much. I don't see any questions right now on the chat, but at this juncture, we shall have the Q&A session. Feel free to raise your hand in case you have a question. Vivian, just let me know, because I don't think I can see all the hands. Just let me know if there's anybody raising their hands. And these questions will be posed to the first two speakers, Musonda and Benjamin. I have a question. Probably Benjamin first. You've highlighted some of the work that you're doing as the UN Women, especially when it comes to the green economy. And I'm just keen to know or to learn more about the strategies you really use that have enabled the UN Women to influence policies, especially at the national level, to ensure that the voices of the women are heard, but also the governments really invest in women to ensure that they play their role in managing the climate adversaries for today, but also for tomorrow. Are you able to share with us some of the strategies that have worked for you in specific countries?
So when you want to make change at policy level, I think there's multiple different things. I think one is the availability of data, and partners like the IDRC are very important for UN Women to ensure that we have the evidence to speak from. And we work very closely with both the national statistics offices in the countries, but also looking at private sector organizations or government entities. Once we have the data and we can articulate the argument, then it is advocacy at different levels. One of the key strategies that UN Women utilizes is working through our civil society organizations and the Women's Network. As you are aware, UN Women was established through the women's movement. And so the civil society organizations are a key constituency for UN Women and a key partner in all of our work. So we bring them along with us, sharing the information that we have and learning from them on what works. And then it is multiple levels of advocacy, from the individual level to the technical levels at the different government entities, and then at the political levels as well. And we very strongly mobilize around a common issue. So working on a particular theme for International Women's Day works really well, and we are able to then bring together all the partners and really have the conversation globally and drive the conversation, but at the same time giving everybody enough space to bring their different perspectives into it. For example, in this conversation now, we've started this conversation already from International Rural Women's Day in October of last year, and then we've built it up from there into the CSW conversations that we've had in countries with the technical governments and the consultations. We've then taken the conversation to the African Union, where we just last week finalized the common statement for African Union around this issue on investing in climate change for a sustainable future, and looking at how gender equality comes squarely into it. And then within the next few weeks, towards the end of March, we have, well, starting from next week, we have the Commission for Status of Women in New York, where we will take this conversation again to the global platform. And we're doing this across the regions as well. So not just in East and Southern Africa or in Africa alone, but we have the same conversations happening in Latin America. We have the same conversations happening in Asia Pacific and Europe and everywhere. And this can help us to build that global momentum, but also build the conversation. And it does not have to be led by us. You know, in the case of even this event, we are really encouraging everybody to be part of the conversation, to take the action on their side. And we are here to support with the knowledge and the content and to coordinate the processes where required. But otherwise, we really want our constituencies to take forward the conversation. And that's really how you can make the real change. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing those examples. Any other question before we move on? Colleagues, you're encouraged to speak up.
I'll just mention very quickly, because there is just a note from Damaris from UNEP on how people, if they want to be a part of the network, I've just put in there a link on the Network of African Women Environmentalists, and at the bottom of that website, you can see all the information in relation to how you can be a part of the movement, how you can also, this is also very much closely linked to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and UN Women is actually one of the founding members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, I had a question for you about that network. Maybe just a minute. I wanted to know your vision for this network, because we are all thinking about engaging such advocacy groups, you know, to voice the needs or challenges that women really face in the context of climate change. How do you foresee the role of this civil society organization in influencing and bringing about transformative change? Especially, you can speak to Newa.
Okay, no, thank you so very much. I think part of the ambition of setting up this network, Annette and colleagues, is that, look, I mean, I've been working through a multilateral institution within the United Nations, and yet we know for sure, even as sort of Mejahabeen has actually alluded to, a lot of the action is actually happening on the ground. A lot of times, the bridging across this divide, this massive chasm of sharing information on how people can access information, can access resources, funding, etc., to continue doing the work that they're doing well, doesn't happen quite well. But also, I think for me, what's exciting about this network is about the power of the collective. I'm of South African heritage, also the very power of Ubuntu. I am because we are. What I do here in Kenya would inspire a woman in Senegal, or let alone a woman in Morocco, and vice versa. It's bringing about these mechanisms. And then also coming out of COP26, last year, we did see that there was a lot of discussions around, empowerment, around climate financing, etc. How do we demystify and unpack that information for the average woman on the ground? What does it actually mean? I don't want this conversation to remain at this higher level, but it also has to cascade down to the communities that are doing so much on the ground. And then we amplify their voices to really demonstrate what they're doing. And this is the purpose of this network. Over.
You there? I just also wanted to build on what Dr. Musonda just spoke about. The networks such as the one she's representing today are very, very important also to build that momentum and to have the space. In some of the policy spaces where we engage, one of the key things that we try to do is bring real women into the conversation. So it's not always UN Women speaking on behalf of the women. We really try to bring the women to speak for themselves in these spaces. And networks such as NEWA are super important to be able to give us that space and to have that legitimacy to speak. But also this network, the Gender and Livelihoods Network, is similarly important because we have a collective, we have common vision and common priorities that we can then present in the policy spaces. And this is crucial in bringing that space, bringing that voice forward. And we really need to break that rhetoric that women can't speak for themselves. Women are very capable to speak for themselves, and women know their realities. In many spaces, it is a question of giving them the room to speak. And we even as UN Women, we are constantly challenged about this. What does UN Women know about trade, for example? What does UN Women know about economic empowerment or macroeconomics? Well, I'll tell you about what women know about, UN Women knows about trade, or the AFCFTA for that matter. That 75% of the cross-border trade in Africa is done by women. That's what UN Women knows about trade. And that's the voice that we will bring to the table. And that's as an example, but I think in this case, it is very important to have those collectives, to have that space for women to develop that common vision so that it is inclusive, that vision. And then we are able to propel that vision into the policy spaces and say that we can speak for a larger population of women rather than just at the individual level. Thank you. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you very much. I think that was great. Thank you very much for adding on to that point. Excellent. Colleagues, next we shall have Naomi Shadrach, Women's Land Policy Advisor at Oxfam.
Okay. Thank you so much, Annette. Should I share my presentation because I prepared a presentation?
Vivian will be sharing the presentation.
Okay.
You get guide down when you want to move on to the next slide.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Thanks, Annette, and the organizers for organizing this event, which is very important. I know there have been presentations. For me, I thought I should share a bit from our experience through research and program on what works and what does not work, what has not worked for us, and the importance of transformative leadership for women's land rights and climate justice. So I'll share some of the experience we have had, what we have seen in the nuances surrounding women's land rights and climate justice and all other work we are doing. So why women's land right is critical for gender equality, socioeconomic and climate justice. So reflecting from our work, for example, having that right secured for themselves. For women, we have seen this is very important for their dignity, safety, through programs, monitoring the impact Next slide, please. Okay, monitoring the impact of women having access, control, and owning their land and resource, such as forests and other natural resources. We have seen the impact is in achieving other rights, such as healthy education. Yeah, so this has been very important. But what we have also seen is there have been programs, for example, our programs in agriculture on livelihoods, such as in Ghana, in cocoa. To be a farmer, to be in the network, like farmers network, you need to be having land, and this has been a challenge for women. So when we are talking about empowerment programs for women in agriculture or in other sector which need land, for women that has been a stumbling block, and we don't see women in these activities, these livelihood activities which need them to have land resources. So this is a challenge we have seen, and also we have seen complicated processes which when it comes to legal identification of landowners, such as very long processes to get land certificate, that has been very challenging. But also to most of the women, violence, domestic violence can be land issues. But in most of our government, you find these are two different issues are being settled by different sectors. So if we tell, sorry, can we stay in the same, thanks. So if we tell a woman from a rural area, what's your land issue? They can tell you like violence against women because they don't have voice. But to a person, like to a land specialist in the government, that can be seen as not a land issue, but to them that's a very big land issue. But also in issues such as mining areas, small artisan miners, to them land, for women to be in those activities is a big challenge. But in different parts of, especially in Africa, we see like the move to move toward capitalism. So like every land has to be known, and every land has to be there should be certificates. So most of the women in Africa, we know, they were accessing land, clan land through their clan. So they had access rights. But now when every land has to be documented, commodified, that means you find the owner is one person who can sell that land and women can lose. So these are the issues and nuances which challenges women to get their rights and to live in equality with women, and to excel on different issues, on different areas of their empowerment because of different challenges surrounding them. So in our empowerment projects, in our livelihood project, these have been challenges, small issues which in our programs we might not see them, but they give challenges to women. Okay, next slide, please. What is possible based on the issues I've mentioned? What is possible and where are we seeing progress? Next slide, please. Okay, so as I said, the title of my presentation is Transformative Leadership for Women's Rights. This is a process of working together to transform systemic oppression against women globally, with ultimate goal of being realization of gender and social justice for women's rights. So this is also some discussion, definition of transformative leadership. It touches individual and collective, woman as an individual and collective. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, so I want to speak about what transformative leadership does, and this may link to what others have presented. On the right, upper right angle on resources, for women to be able to own businesses, to be farmers, they should have resources, and these are like land, capital, to be able to be farmers, to be able to compete in business and other issues. So for women, this has been very challenging issues based on history, that women were not allowed to own, and were owning through male representative in their families. So when we are looking at women empowerment, I think this is very important thing to consider, and also consciousness and capabilities. We know even in issues of awareness, education, these are very important for women. Some do not know what are the rights. I'll talk about rights in another presentation, in another thing. But what we have seen, for example, one of our research we have seen. For a number of years, we have worked on laws to make sure that we have a good framework at the regional level, at African Union level. For example, for us who are working on land, we have policy and guideline at the African Union level. We have good laws, some binding, some non-binding, at the African Union level, at the national level. But we still see the realities of women is different from what is in the law, even in their countries. What is in the law and what is the reality of the lives of women is different. So one of the reasons might be awareness. So women are not aware of how their laws can protect them. But also we have worked a lot on the rules and policies. We have been like monitoring policies. We have been working with policymakers at different levels to ensure that these programs and these our ambitions are into the laws. But also norms and exclusionary practices. I think Majabin has spoken about this. Norms have put women far from achieving their ambition. So importance of support collaboration to influence social norms and informal decision-making processes, ensuring that women are reaching decision-making tables. This is very important because if we think that like rural women can reach decision-making tables without our programs addressing that, that would be very difficult. So how do we leave the table? How do we hand over mic to rural women? It's not that they don't know to speak. It's not that they can't speak at the Africa Union meeting or CSW. How do our programs in CSW or in International Women's Day make the voice of rural women amplified? We have to get there to make sure that their voice are heard, and we amplify their good practices. For example, in climate change, we know the indigenous knowledge on preservation of land, indigenous knowledge on conservation of land, conservation of forest. How do we make sure that rural women who are custodian of land and forest, and custodian of environment, their knowledge, their voice are heard, and we are ensuring that we are giving them space, we are giving them platform to make sure that they share their expertise in all those big platforms, COP and other, where decisions are being made. So this is called a gender at work framework, where we see different nuances which may result to our programs or our campaigns to not be successful. And we are trying to learn in different work we are doing, for example, in land rights. Our program here, what has been the challenges? Like for the past years we have worked in this, what has been the challenges? Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, so this is what I was mentioning in my presentation. So to build their collective energy and individual capacity, making sure that the rural women, the African women have capacity to speak for themselves in this platform, especially in platforms where their decisions are being made. And by using transformative leadership approach, it starts with a woman as herself to be able, the agency comes from rural women. They're the ones who can change their lives. Sometimes we may think that us who are working in women's rights can change the lives of women, but no, it's themselves who can change their lives by making sure that they are conscious, like what are our roles in this. It's make sure that they have this information and they get that agency to change their own lives by themselves. So this is very important to make sure that we address the root causes of their vulnerability, and to make sure that they are able to transform their lives, to make sure that the laws and policies at the national level are implemented. That has been a very big challenge because for us as civil society, I know even the UN and other research organizations, we have worked a lot on laws and policies, influencing the laws, reforms. But what we have seen, the reality of lives of women is different. Even the Generation Equality Forum, I think it's addressing that, because the 25 years of Beijing, although the Beijing platform for action is very strong document, but we haven't seen major change for lives of women. So we have to do something. We have to see what are the real challenge for women, what our programs do, and what are we not addressing? By doing that, I think we can touch the real issues of women and make sure that women's lives are transformed. I don't know if I'm still having time or, sorry, Annette.
You don't have any more time.
Okay, thanks. Maybe other things which I wanted to say, I'll talk about them when I respond to questions. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you very much, Naomi, for those insights, transformative leadership. I think I would love to learn more about that, but I'll pose that question later on during the Q&A session, because I'm curious really to know how this can be scaled. Let's quickly move on to our next presenter, that is Dorothy Aseo, the Ag Assistant Country Director Programs, Care International in Kenya, where she provides strategic leadership and direction for the country office program portfolio, both development and humanitarian, in line with Kenya International and Care Kenya's vision and goals. She'll be speaking about the role of women's voice and leadership in gender transformative climate. So these two topics kind of speak to each other. So I think this will be very substantive as it adds on to what Naomi has just discussed. So Dorothy, the floor is yours. 10 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Annette, and warm greetings to everyone on the call, and happy International Women's Day, and happy to be part of this webinar, and thank you so much to the previous panelists for the contribution into this discussion. As Annette has been able to introduce me, I'm Dorothy Aseo, and I'm the Director of Programs, Care International in Kenya, and I'll be able to just contribute to the discussion in line with the role of women voice and leadership in gender transformative climate action, and exactly what CARE has been doing both in practice and knowledge in regard to this particular work. So looking at actually what we've been able to undertake as CARE International is that I'll be sharing some insights around where we are globally and also nationally in terms of our role in climate action, what we are doing in terms of gender integration, the role of women voice and leadership, and the recommendations. Next slide, please. Yes, I think I just made that outline, so I will go direct into our contribution. So as we all know that Kenya actually has highly been vulnerable, and the effects of climate change has been actually affecting a lot on our reliance on agriculture, natural resource, and actually 26% of our GDP contributes to agriculture, which is actually the backbone of most of our rural communities, and also a contribution to the economy in this country. Therefore, climate change and also issues around making gender inequality has been worsening, especially for the world poorest women and girls. But the most powerful agents of change actually are women and girls, and also leading a lot of responses in their communities and action. Therefore, climate policies haven't taken a very, very strong gender equality approach, and therefore there is a lot to be done in terms of actually how we need to ensure representation, actually meaningful participation and policy development and overall leadership, because this is key, as the previous panelists have kept on reiterating, that we need this actually to be able to capture the aspects of gender equality into climate action and the policies related to that. Therefore, looking at what I had just initially indicated is that women and girls actually face that double injustice. And from the previous slide, you saw a photo, a very powerful photo, and it's still on this slide, also showing climate injustice and also gender injustice. Therefore, gender inequality is actually a huge result of climate injustice. Therefore, it is very important for us to really factor in and deliberately invest into climate actions. And I'm glad to hear from our other actors how investments are going into this. And I will be touching a little bit around that in terms of what CARE has been able to do, both globally and also nationally in Kenya regarding this. Next. So in regards to actually our relevance in integrating women leadership and voice gender equality into climate action and policy, we acknowledge that as part of the work that we are doing at our gender justice work. And increasingly, we are recognizing and also putting in planning and supporting intervention that build people's resilience and climate action and disasters at national level. And our contribution even at COP26, actually, for instance, we recognize the full, meaningful and equal participation and leadership of women, and looking at the processes and national and local level climate policy and action in vital, which was critically vital in long-term climate goals. So we are continuing to invest in that, and in our work here in Kenya, we have the climate fund work that we are actually investing in, working with counties that actually are looking at green climate funding that actually is able to strengthen our actions regarding climate justice. Also, we recognize that only 20-25% of our annual climate finance, overall annual climate finance has been allocated to adaptation, and less than 10%, of course, of these disbursements are used for adaptation purposes at local level. Therefore, there's a huge gap, and this is the gap that we want everyone on this call to really rally and push for it actually to be addressed, to relate to exactly the commitments that we have been able to make. And recently, CARE actually shared a report from 6 countries that analyzed and actually brought out that 47% of the adaptation projects did not mainstream gender equality and either have a gender marker, which is a very critical tool to really look at how actually we are integrating gender into these particular adaptation projects. I would really encourage all of us to actually get this report and read through and find some insights that can be able to help our work moving forward. And I will be sharing this link in the chat before the end of this particular session. And all of us actually will be able to benefit in one way or another on this particular analysis that came out. Next. So integrating women in climate adaptation actually has been at the heart of the work of what we do in CARE. And I would like to really bring to the attention of the participants of this call that we are tackling this using our gender equality framework, which is actually a framework that has been working for climate adaptation for CARE for more than 20 years, and actually using and implementing community-based adaptation approaches and using the key tools such as the climate vulnerability and analysis. Therefore, this is one of the approaches that has been very, very key in giving us those particular results that we've been seeing across our confederation and also in Kenya specifically to actually address some of the climate areas and also contributing to climate action. And also we take pride in facilitating dialogues around climate and gender practitioners from government, civil society, and stakeholders, and integrating all gender equality and empowerment of women and girls in the design, implementation, and even policies and locally led adaptation of communities, and putting actually them at the center of our implementation and monitoring. And not also to forget that funding has been a very, very key component for us and our partners, whereby we provide grants and sub-grants to our local women-led organizations, feminist movements, and even institutions that actually have local-led support in climate action and solutions. And this is an area that we will continue to invest in, and we call other parties to continue investing in providing these resources that are critical for climate action. And of course, mentioning around just a representation, which actually cuts across in terms of leadership, in terms of participation, and in terms of engagement. That one is an area that we've actually used to integrate women in climate adaptation. And lastly on that is just ensuring that we keep on pushing the implementation of the gender action plans and to address gaps in a view that actually is able to bring women leadership at national and local levels in terms of policies and plans, which is an area that we are gaining much traction, and we are proud to have all of you and also others participate and support us in achieving that. Next. So the role of women voice and leadership is critical in climate action, and CARE has been investing in this, and we recognize unpaid care work, time poverty, limited decision making, and even unequal access and control of resources, as explained by my previous panelist. From Oxfam. This actually reduces even issues to do with effective adoption and strategies, and also responding even to disasters and climate change and the cyclic climate shocks. Therefore, we recognize that women's perspectives are very, very key, and we look at that in terms of investing, as I mentioned, in feminist movements, looking at ecofeminism and just working on all those patriarchal systems and structures, and being unapologetic on that in regard to just ensuring better engagement of women and girls in climate action, and emphasizing on an intersectionality lens, whereby we look at the different intersecting factors that could really bring that vulnerability for women and girls to really bring their voice and action and even leadership in climate justice work. And recently, actually, this is one of the key areas that even we've adopted as a roadmap for CARE International and even our region and CARE Kenya itself, in providing flexible funding, which is very key in terms of rapid response granting and enhancing work around women, human rights defenders, and climate justice advocacy work, and increasing voice and action. Therefore, our recommendations actually come in regards to this work, and maybe move to the next slide so that I can just run through the recommendations quickly. So recommendations actually, we look at the need to design capacity development strategies as I've mentioned, in yielding benefits around women facilitation and capacity building of these organizations. Then gender responsive budgeting, we've talked about this even in this discussion, and we have to continue ensuring that financing comes in on overall service delivery. Then also just taking up approaches that actually address social norms, power norms, and gender norms, which include social analysis and climate change policies around our actions. Then meaningful participation is also a key recommendation. We cannot continue having women and girls missing from this particular space. And last but not least, institutional capacity strengthening, very, very critical. And also what I mentioned in my previous slide about flexible funding. We need to invest in flexible funding, especially on climate action. Thank you so much, and I would want to end it there, Annette, and back to you. And looking forward to sharing the link to the report, and any contributions are welcome from the fellow panelists and also the rest of the members of the call. Asante.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. Interesting conversations happening here. Thank you very much for sharing Kaya's experiences in integrating women's leadership into your programs. So right now we shall get into the Q&A session where the presenters, that's Dorothy and Naomi, will respond to the questions. We have some in the chat, and I think the first one is posed by Edida. And she's saying she's happy to know that Kay is integrating an intersectionality lens. Please share experiences in what is working well so far and what has not worked well and needs improvement. That goes to Dorothy. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I believe it's Edida. Yes,
yes.
Edida, that is a very powerful question. And here we look at intersecting factors that actually result into vulnerability that we have to put into consideration while actually supporting climate justice and action work. Therefore, what has worked, I will still go back to our flexible funding, especially for provision of rapid response grants for women human rights defenders. We realize that actually protection issues are very critical when it comes even to climate action. So how do we look at that intersecting factor, provide that support, and ensure that we are able to continue looking at women who actually push advocacy work and are faced with protection issues, but still are working around climate action and justice. This actually has led us to partner with other women feminist organizations like Urgent Action Fund Africa to provide this funding and ensure that women are able to access this nimble, timely, and fast funding that they can be able to address climate action. And we've brought on board actually indigenous women. We've been able to work with rural women who completely could not access resources to advance their climate action and justice. This is an area we are proud and we really want to advocate for in terms of just looking at the intersectionality that needs to be put forward in terms of climate action and justice. Thank you. Annette, over.
Thank you very much, Dorothy, and you have some shout outs in the chat that you can read. I'll open the discussion. Oh no, let me have one question for Naomi before we open the floor.
There's another question.
Yes, please.
There's another question for me. There's another question for me on the chat, I think.
Oh, please, I didn't see that. Go ahead, please.
Yes, so there's a question on the chat or saying what has changed over time. Yeah, so for me, what I can say is a lot has changed, especially in Africa. We work globally, I work globally, but I can say in Africa, we have seen big changes happening for women's land rights. Since 2009, when African presidents declared Africa Union agenda on land. We saw civil society coming together and as of supporting civil society to make sure that because what the head of states wanted is to have to make sure that the agenda on land in Africa to ensure that their guide on policies, guide on how land is governed in Africa. And by that time, 2009 up to 2014, there were a lot of issues on land grabbing. There were issues of land grabbing in different parts of Africa. And even the definition, how it happened, was not known. But through years, we have seen in programs, in campaigns, because our work bring both research programs and campaigns together, we're able to amplify the voices of rural women in Africa in order that their voice can help to shape land policies in Africa, land guideline in Africa Union. And I can tell you, we have at Africa Union level, we have the guide on land policy, which is very strong. And we have the guide on large-scale land-based investment in Africa, which is very strong. All these guides were very consultative, and the voices like civil society were able to mobilize grassroots women to speak in this conversation, in this consultation, to make sure that their voices are there. So what I can say has changed, and what we have seen, especially in Africa, we have seen big changes, and a lot has happened. As I said, implementation is another issue. So using transformative leadership frame is very important, because we don't just see, or like I can say in Africa, we have a win in terms of policies and laws, because governments know how to, what is the guide to making policies, but what we don't have now is implementation. Maybe I can also add a little bit on intersectionality. It's something I didn't mention, to add to what Dorothy said. On women's land rights and climate change, what we have seen for us looking on land, we don't just look on farmland. We have to make sure also we look on indigenous land. There are pastoralists in Africa. Because if you just have, you just look at farmers, only farmers, and give them certificates, and make sure that they have land. What about pastoralists whose land may be huge? They don't want boundaries. They don't want small pieces of land, but they want to move with their land. So those nuances, looking at how to address issues, I think that's very powerful aspect of transformative leadership for women's land rights, because we look into different aspects in tackling issues of women from different things.
Thank you very much, Naomi. And I think the next question goes to you. Let me see. This okay, there's shout outs from Alessandra and Gloria would like to connect with Dorothy. And then I think the next question from Ziadi goes to you and Naomi. This question goes, okay, improving laws? Okay, improving laws and policies is great, but in most of African customary laws, we have the norms, okay? How can we improve women's control and transfer rights where gender norms remain strong? Will conversations beyond ownership and promoting legal pluralism be an answer? Great question. How about you, Naomi?
Okay, thank you so much. And that's among the things I did, like I did mention because of time. Not all norms, not all customary laws are bad, and we are very careful mentioning that. Not all customary laws in Africa are bad. Some are empowering, but they are discriminatory laws. They are discriminatory norms. So what we do is to work with traditional leaders. So in our work, in our meeting, in our discussion, we ensure that the traditional leaders are very key. because for them, they're the ones who are overseeing the systems. And we learn a lot from traditional leaders. We learn the things which we didn't know. I know I have been in the meeting with traditional leaders from Uganda. Sometimes what us, like women's rights activists and people working on women's rights, what we are saying, they ask, where are you getting this? Because for them, they don't know. For them, they know like how their customary laws, at what angles their customary laws protect women. So what we do is ensure that we work with traditional leaders. We work in order to address the discriminatory customary laws, and we are very careful to not mention that all the customary laws are bad, because there are those customary laws which protect women. And when we are working on reform, we are very careful to not write that we have to kill customary laws in Africa. That would be a very bad, I think according to transformative leadership, that would be a very bad approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Naomi. I think the next is Connection Jean, Dorothy, and Gloria. Please connect and push the agenda forward. Any other questions to the 4 panelists, please? We have a few minutes, about 7 minutes to go. So in case you have any question to any of the presenters, please, you're free to raise up your hand. Okay, don't see any hands up. Elizabeth, do you have a question? Elizabeth, please mute your mic. Okay, I think I don't see any hands up. I had one question for Naomi, a clarification. You mentioned the major challenge for women that struggle to have access and control over land, the challenge being domestic violence. In your programs, when you come across such women that have experienced domestic violence, beyond the transformative leadership, do you have like a help desk where you refer these women to, without also compromising their integrity, and self-esteem? I'm looking for ways to support such women that have been really exposed to such violence, how you can help them rebuild themselves, overcome the challenges that they're going through, especially in the context of climate change and the pandemic that has further aggravated the situation. Yeah, how are you really supporting these women? Because I'm sure that there should be many.
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe speaking on that specific issue, I can speak from my experience with Tanzania. When I was working with Oxfam in Tanzania, we are working with our partner called WILAC. So in Tanzania, for example, the big domestic violence, which lets women's land rights, is inheritance. There is pluralism when it comes to inheritance. There is inheritance through customary ways, there is inheritance through statutory, and also there's India where there's Islamic laws. So all this coming together is a big challenge for women. You find when a woman goes to court, when the law uses customary law to judge the case, that woman can fail. So our partner WILAC has a very good experience in that. When women could not get their right in inheritance, they took this case to CEDAW, the CEDAW committee, addressing the challenges in Tanzania for inheritance for women, and because it's something which is coming due to pluralism in our legal system of inheritance. And what happened, the CEDAW committee went back to the government of Tanzania to address that, to address the legal pluralism and on the issue of inheritance. In the issue of inheritance, but also another thing which the partners are doing is to ensure that there is dual land ownership in the programs.
Excuse me, Naomi. Somebody is not muted. Pubdin, I think it's Pubdin. Please mute your mic.
Okay, let me continue. Because of the challenges which happen, maybe if you can mute. Okay, thanks. Yeah. So because of the challenges which come during the process of case, we have seen so many women having case, and they may take long, and the laws have not been reformed yet. So in our programs on land certificates and land ownership, there's a great awareness creation on joint land titling. So you see most of the civil society, when they help community to secure their land, right, they emphasize on joint titling for farmers, because when there's joint titling, that means women are there. Okay, women are there as owners, not as a wife. If you have a title where a woman has her name on the certificate, she's there as co-owner, not as a wife, and that's a security for her in any issue which might happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Naomi. And actually, had another question in the chat from Mercy, but we don't have time to respond to that. Please connect with Mercy and help understand if at all there are any other alternative ways to own land. At this juncture, we have just a minute. Nicolene, I'm sorry about this, but let me hand over the mic to Nicolene to close the session, and also, yeah, appreciate our speakers. Nicolene, over to you.
Thanks, Annette, and thanks, Annette, as well for putting this wonderful panel together. Thanks to everyone as well for joining us today. I think it's been an interesting and exciting conversation. Lots of things have come up, issues about survive and thrive and how do we make changes, personal stories, how do we invest in young women, the importance of data, the need for gender markers, which I would also support, also the importance of laws, but also how do you actually implement them? We can say there are laws for women, but if women don't know about them and how do they go about actually using them, it's also not much use. Giving them voice, all important issues. So really appreciate everyone for spending time with us on this day when we know you probably are all busy since it's International Women's Day. So we do appreciate it. I do also want to quickly say that's what this network is for. It's to bring different people together with different contributions to, I think, what we're all working towards, which is women's empowerment and gender equality in this space. So I really am happy to see that we did get a good group of people. We hope to be able to have more engagement and hear from more people what they do. So look forward to those conversations as well. Thanks again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful International Women's Day. But remember, it's not just today, it's every day. So appreciate everyone's work on this. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, colleagues, all those that have been behind the scenes, Vivian, Nancy, Soka, Jemima, who left us. Thank you very much. And I'll say bye-bye, wishing you a happy International Women's Day.